for round 2 of the Other Worlds? I know I said that I wasn't going to do it outside because of my pool heater that I think you can still hear, but I have children and we're all stuck in this house, and so this is the quietest place that I have. But we're going to go ahead and start. Chapter 2, The Other Worlds. Terry, Hilda screamed into the kitchen. Where are those dishes? Sounds like the old one needs more sleep, Terry muttered, dropping the large silver platter onto the counter in front of her. Danny stopped beside her and began filling the platter with bowls of steaming food. You're going to get it, Terry. She glanced over her shoulder at the kitchen door. She sounds real mad this time. Oh, relax, Terry laughed. You know you're only in trouble if... Terry! Hilda shrieked. If you don't have those dishes in my hands within the next... The rest of her words were lost to a huge pot clinging to the floor. She's mad, Terry winced. Danny shoved the full platter into Terry's arms. Go! Terry dashed to the giant kitchen that served the Lance de Capron's castle. As she ran, she nearly tripped 3 cooks and bumped into 4 servers, but luckily she managed to keep the food upright and on the platter. She smiled and slid to a stop in front of Hilda. The fat grouch yanked the platter out of her hands before haughtily rushing out to the Lance's banquet, reminding Terry of an overstuffed peacock far behind its prime. Terry, Danny called out from the back of the kitchen, I still need you. Be right there. Terry spun on her heels back through the crowded maze of servants. 3 hours later, but what seemed more like 12, Terry made her way up to the turret she shared with 10 other slaves, including Danny. Night had begun its cycle hours before, and Terry wished she had been sleeping for most of it. Her shoulders ached from carrying heavy trays, her legs from climbing sets of stairs, and her eyes from being open. At least the Lance hadn't ordered her to sing, otherwise her throat might have ached as well. For some reason, the Lance's wife, preferred Terry's voice above all the other musicians hired for special occasions. She had the silly idea that Terry had the voice of an Eve, going so far as to call Terry's talent a gift. It was only praise. Terry was a Serd, completely and utterly giftless. If she were anything else, there would be no reason for her to waste time singing at the Lance's banquets and balls. It wasn't the singing that bothered Terry, though. In truth, she loved to perform. It got her out of the kitchen. No, it was being ordered to sing that Terry hated. As a slave, Terry had no say in what she could or could not do. If she was told to sing, then she sang. If she was ordered to walk across the battlements on a tightrope while barefoot, then she had better be shucking off her shoes. It was the life of an orphan in a Kendron world. A generation or 2 before, the people of Devon joined themselves to the Kendrons. Their leaders had decided that instead of waiting around for an attack, they would simply volunteer themselves into the Kendron kingdom. As a reward, Devon royalty kept their positions as sovereigns, only answering to the Kendron brothers. For the most part, Devon was able to remain as its own entity. However, some traditions and laws of the Kendrons were adopted, such as the use of Arthelion. It had become the acknowledged language of the Serds under Kendron rule. True Serds still spoke Serdian. It was a sort of common tongue between the other worlds, but the Kendrons saw it as lowly. They chose to enforce their own creation of Arthelion as the new Serdian. Thus, Terry had been forced to learn Arthelion from birth. She hated Arthelion. It was tiring and unpleasant. Thankfully, slaves only had to use it when speaking to their possessors. In Devon, those who spoke Arthelion had political status, such as the Lance and Lents. Another tradition Devons acquired from the Kendrons was the abolishment of orphanages. Instead of orphanages, orphans were given as slaves to the richer inhabitants. In Terry's case, she had been placed with the Lance as a toddler. She'd spent her known life within the walls of the Lance's castle. Sadly, she couldn't remember anything of her parents or life as a free child, and unlike the slaves who sought to erase their pasts, it bothered her that she didn't have a single memory to cling to. Terry sighed as she continued up the stone stairwell, watching out for the broken sections of the steps. The Lance's castle wasn't exactly in the best shape, but Terry blamed that on his place in the line for the throne. In the other worlds, the system of royalty fell from king and queen to the eldest heir, the prince or princess. Below the heir sat the siblings, the Lances and Lences. The Lance de Capron was the second youngest in a long line of 12. Terry highly doubted that the Lance would ever be anything more than a Lance, unless a sudden plague destroyed his entire family. But a plague was more unlikely than the Lance becoming king. Thus, the Lance's stairwells were to remain in disrepair. He did not have the means to fix them, especially those used only by slaves. At last, Terry reached the top of the last set of stairs. She let out a soft cry of relief and pulled a torch out of its mount on the wall. As usual, she had been the first to leave for bed. With a yawn, she walked the short distance to the familiar oak door and pushed it open. She was surprised to find the room dark and empty. Not that it mattered. She could walk the room blindfolded. She knew it far too well. Terry turned to the mount beside the door and slipped the torch into it. The torch offered her enough light to see the outlines of the beds. Terry yawned again and headed for her bed at the far end of the room. She slipped out of her worn leather shoes before collapsing onto her bed, still fully clothed. Terry let out a soft groan and rolled onto her side. It took her about 3 more seconds to realize that she wasn't alone. She jumped up with a shriek. "Relax, he's not going to bite you." Terry whirled just as Krenna, the servant's nurse, entered the room with a bundle in her arms. Terry stared at her. "Who is he?" "A new slave," she replied, dropping her armful at the foot of Terry's bed. "I told the men this bed was taken, but they said you could sleep elsewhere." There was a surprise. Terry grunted. The men Krenna referred to were the slave traders. They were given orphan children and expected to place them in homes. Terry hated the looks they gave the older slave girls like herself. She didn't like the smell of ale they always carried with them, but apparently others did. Some slave girls chose to marry them. "I need you to roll him onto his back." Krenna's voice brought back Terry's attention. She blinked and repeated her earlier question. "Who is he?" "I think they call him Teve, and a Darien clan leader traded him for food and supplies." The Wanderers were here? Terry had only seen them twice in her life. They did not stay in one world for long. Krenna nodded once as she yanked off the top of one of her bottles. "Roll him onto his back." "What's wrong with him?" Terry pulled at his shoulder. "He's contracted a minor case of sleeping sickness." She grabbed a spoon from her apron and poured a thick, dark liquid onto it. "It's an agony to the body." "Sleeping causes pain?" Terry ran her eyes over his face. He seemed so familiar, like a character from a dream. "This kind of sleep does. Instead of taking energy from you, energy from sleep, sleep takes energy from you." She frowned, her favorite expression. If the boy's not treated, he could die within a week from exhaustion. "Now hold him up enough for him to swallow without choking." Terry obeyed. "What is that?" "Lithium." She blinked. "I thought that was used on horses, to ease their birthing pains." "Well, today is his medicine," Krenna retorted, holding the spoon to his lips. It spilt along the side of his mouth. Some of the mess must have made it inside, though, because almost instantly he began coughing and spluttering. Krenna poured another spoonful and shoved it between his lips. "He should be awake enough now to swallow it," she said, retrieving her spoon from his mouth. Terry noticed it was empty. Krenna tucked the spoon back into her apron. "You can lay him back down now." Will he be well again?" By morning, Krenna picked up her bundle. "Lithium has more than one use." She frowned. "Get to bed." "Where?" "In your bed. Where else?" Terry stared at her. "But he's in it." "He's asleep. He won't do anything to you." "But I have more sick servants to tend to tonight," Krenna cut her off. "I cannot cater to your needs. You have 2 options, the floor or your bed. Just be thankful that you can go to bed." She began towards the room's door, muttering, "I won't get to see mine for at least 3 more hours." "Great," Terry grunted. There was just enough room at the foot of her bed for her to curl up. She groaned and dropped into it once more, hoping sleep would come fast. Alright, so we're on the next part. I'm not sure if Instagram will let me keep going because I'm almost at 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop here and pick this back up in a minute in another video, okay?